In my last video, I talked about one of my key focuses for gaining and maintaining motivation, and that was a focus on doing. In this video, I'm going to talk about my second key focus for motivation, and that is a focus on giving. Growing up, I was always told the value of giving and how important it was, but I didn't really see the full value in it until I read this book called the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is an ancient Hindu spiritual text, which I'm not Hindu or anything like that, but I heard it recommended a couple years ago, and I picked up a copy. I think it was in 2015, so a year and a half ago, and I was blown away. There's so much wisdom, so much value that this book has to offer behind kind of the religious scripture aspects of it, but I won't go into detail in this video about the book, but the main premise, though, is basically it follows the story of a soldier called Arjuna, and Arjuna is basically asking for advice from the Lord Krishna, who's, I guess, an incarnation of God, on how to fight a battle between his family. So he's going into war against his cousins or something like that. And he's very nervous, he's very upset, he doesn't really want to fight this battle. So the book takes the form of Krishna giving advice to Arjuna, but it's not really about a battle or specific stuff like that. It becomes, I guess, a journey towards enlightenment. So Krishna basically tells Arjuna how to become enlightened or reach the supreme goal, as they call it. One of the main ideas in the Bhagavad Gita is something called selfless service or selfless action, which is basically just unselfish action. And Krishna recommends it to Arjuna as a method, I guess you could say, of achieving the supreme goal of enlightenment. Right here I have a quote from the Bhagavad Gita that I think really, captures this idea of selfless service. It says, "Strive constantly to serve the welfare of the world. By devotion to selfless work, one attains the supreme goal of life. Do your work with the welfare of others always in your mind." I think there's two ways you can kind of interpret this idea of selfless service. So the first one would be this idea of doing all your work with the welfare of others in your mind. So basically just, whenever you're doing something, only do it to benefit others. But on a more broader, scale, there's another way you could look at it, and I think this is the main focus of the book, is taking your ego out of your work, taking your ego out of your actions. And selfless service, or doing things for the welfare of others, is really just, a way to remove your ego from a situation. I don't think this idea of selfless service is really about being like the next Mother Teresa or devoting your life to helping others and not pursuing any kind of selfish goals. I think it's just a manner or a way of approaching things that puts less emphasis on what you can gain and your own gratification, and more emphasis on how you can benefit other people. And I found, and I'm about to explain how, that this is a really powerful motivator, especially when that own selfish motivation, which is good, I think you need it, when it doesn't last. When I first read this book, I was working at a summer camp back in California, and my main job was running a summer camp. I think it was 4 days a week, so that's about 6 hours a day of working with kids, and I loved it. It was actually probably one of the first jobs I was actually passionate about, but it was exhausting. And anyone who's worked with 30 kids at a time will tell you that it's hard work, and after a while it can kind of get a little taxing. So I read this book, and I was kind of in a slump in motivation. I wasn't really feeling energized to go to work, and I tried to use this idea of selfless service by reframing how I viewed my job. Instead of thinking, how can I get the most out of this job, how can I make this job make me happy, I decided, why am I doing this job? Well, it's to help the kids. It's to give these kids the best experience possible, to give them the best summer camp I possibly could have, to teach them, to help them. So I started looking at work like that, and I found that I got like an instant boost of energy, and every day, even when during the day I'd start to feel a dip in motivation, I would kind of just tinker in my head a little bit and say, no, wait, I'm doing this for the kids, I'm doing this to help them. And I gotta say, it turned my work experience into something that, wasn't terrible to begin with, but was getting exhausting, to something that I thoroughly enjoyed until the end. I'm taking the same approach when it comes to teaching English now. I would never say that teaching is my greatest passion. I enjoy it a little bit, but to be honest, like working with kids, especially when teaching a foreign language, is exhausting. So I'm really trying to put in the work to change my mindset from how can this job help me to how can I help these kids? How can I help these students get the most out of class? And so far, it's not always perfect, but it definitely gives me more motivation and more inspiration to help others. Of course, focusing on giving value isn't just for things that you're not passionate about or that are exhausting. I actually think it's an extremely powerful motivator when combined with something you're passionate about. So let's even take these videos, for example. I gave an example of how I took action for making this YouTube channel in my last video. But one thing I found is there's a lot of overthinking that goes into making videos, putting out content in whether it's blog form, video form, anything. A lot of anxiety that comes with it. But that's all ego. That's all, how can I make myself happy? How will other people view me? How will people react to my content? Instead of looking at it like that, I try to take a mindset of how can I put out content that other people enjoy or that could help other people. And not everybody will enjoy everything I put out, and not everything will benefit. Everyone will benefit from it. But it's just like a mind game, not a mind game, but it's like a mental yoga, I guess you could call it, in order to take your ego out of the equation. And what I've noticed though is that by focusing on giving value and not just trying to take and get gratification from others, I'm actually becoming a more unselfish person in general. I'm actually starting to feel more empathy, feel more compassion towards others, and it's kind of like an upward spiral of giving and gratitude and action and all this really awesome stuff. I'll end this video with saying that if you're thinking about how can I put a focus on giving in my life, I personally believe it could be applied to pretty much anything you do, no matter how selfish it might seem on the surface. So one example I can think of, I just started going to the gym, and you could say, well, how is working on your physical fitness? I mean, I want to get muscles, I want to get bigger, stronger, I want to look better, I want to feel better. How is that at all an unselfish thing? How can you focus on giving when doing that? Well, I would say if you do a little mental yoga, off the top of my head, I would say that, well, by being in better health, in better shape, I'm going to have more energy to give positive vibes to other people, to do my best at my job, to write these blog posts and make these YouTube videos. I'll live longer, most likely, because I'll be in better health, which means the people around me, the people I'm close to, will be happier. And maybe I'll set a positive example for the people closest to me, to my family, to my friends. If they see me working out and really focusing on my health, maybe they'll focus on theirs a little bit more as well. So, that's just one example, but I really encourage you to think about how pretty much everything you can do, you can find some kind of unselfish motivation to it. And like I said, selfish motivation is great. I think wanting your own personal goals and your own personal happiness is awesome. But if you need a little extra kick, a little boost to keep going, definitely think about how a focus on giving could, add some value to your life.